If I were to just read you some terms from the documents we have in front of us, with no context at all, you'd probably think we were looking at a script for a heist movie.
Oh, yeah? A spy thriller?
Exactly. I mean, we've got perimeter scanning, asset tracking, surveillance awareness, and this is my personal favorite, scene generation.
It really does have a cinematic feel to it, doesn't it? Scene generation sounds like something you do in, like, an improv class, not something you'd find in a security report.
Right, but it's not fiction. This is all from a set of really rigorous, data-heavy reports. They're analyzing security logs at a residential facility.
Hmm.
We're looking at a whole stack of documents here, all centered on this thing called the Intensified Labor Tracker. And honestly, the deeper you go, you realize security isn't just, it's not a guy with a flashlight anymore. It's all about data, statistical modeling.
It is. And that's what we're going to do in this deep dive. We're going to unpack how security professionals use that data. We have 25 recorded incidents, different workers, maids, contractors, supervisors.
Okay.
And we're going to see how they use everything from basic averages all the way up to complex Bayesian analysis to figure out who's just doing their job.
Yeah.
And who is, as the report puts it, testing the fence.
Testing the fence. I love that phrase. It's so evocative. So, okay, lay out the groundwork for us. What's the big picture here? What are we trying to solve?
So the core mission really is to solve a paradox. You have this facility, lots of people coming and going.
Right.
You've got your resident hired staff, so housekeepers, nannies, that kind of thing. And then you have contractor managed staff, supervisors, migrant labor crews, fixing the plumbing.
And the security team has to know where the real risk is coming from.
Exactly. And the big lesson here, I think, is that volume, just how many people you see, is often a huge distraction from intensity, from how risky those people actually are.
Okay, let's get into this data set then. So 25 logs. That might sound like a small number to some people, but the average severity rating here is, well, it's pretty alarming.
It is high.
Yeah.
Yeah, the average is 3.6 out of 5.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, a 5 is like a critical direct threat.
So 3.6 is not trivial.
Not at all. We're not looking at minor parking violations. These are significant events. They're breaches, confrontations, or surveillance attempts.
And the cast of characters here, that's what jumps out at me. The report breaks them down. You've got housekeeping, dotted labor, migrant labor, contractor supervisors. And this goes right to that paradox you mentioned, because if I'm a security guard just looking at the raw numbers, who am I going to be most suspicious of?
You're looking at the housekeeping staff, without a doubt.
Just because there are more of them?
Because they generate the most reports.
Right.
They account for 32% of all the incidents, so almost a third of all the suspicious logs. It's just housekeepers.
So your brain just naturally goes, okay, the maids are the problem. That's where all the activity is.
Exactly. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, that's a trap. Because when you start to look at the severity ratings, the whole story just flips. Well, the housekeepers, they're there a lot, sure,
Yeah.
but their average severity is around 3.5. But now look at the labor contractor, supervisor category.
Okay.
They account for way fewer incidents, so they
Yeah.
might, fly under the radar if you're just counting heads. But their average severity rating, it's 3.83. That's the highest of any group.
So the supervisors show up less often, but when they do, it's much more serious.
That's it. And it's worth noting, too, that 80% of these incidents have visual evidence, photos, videos. So this isn't just, a guard's opinion or hearsay. It's documented.
Which makes you ask, what are they actually doing? I mean, you don't get a 3.83 severity rating for taking a long lunch. And the report has this section, factor analysis, which I thought was fascinating. It groups all these behaviors into clusters.
Factor analysis is a great tool for this. Instead of just looking at one thing, like someone looking at a camera,
It looks for patterns.
it asks, when someone does X, do they also tend to do Y? It finds the narrative in the data.
And it found 3 of them, 3 clusters.
Yep, 3 distinct clusters of behavior.
So let's go through them because they really do sound like chapters in a detective novel. Cluster 1 is called passive surveillance.
Or the scout. The main behaviors here are perimeter scanning and surveillance awareness.
Perimeter scanning sounds very technical. Is that just walking near the fence?
It's a bit more than that. It's walking systematically along the boundaries, checking the fence line, looking for gaps, blind spots. And surveillance awareness is a polite way of saying they're looking right at the cameras. Or staring down the guards, they're checking the sidelines.
So this is pure information gathering. They're not touching anything. They're just watching.
Exactly. It's gathering intel without making contact. It applies a certain level of sophistication.
Okay, then there's cluster 2. This one feels a lot more confrontational. Oh, overt confrontation.
This is the aggressor mode. You see things like synchronized conversations,
Meaning?
meaning multiple people talking in a coordinated way, not just, chatting. And there are specific verbal threats. The report actually quotes one, the threat to throw stones.
That's oddly specific. And SAR gestures, suspicious activity reporting gestures. So this isn't about sneaking. It's intimidation.
It's all about signaling intent, letting security know we're here and we're organized. But then we get to cluster 3, and the report says this is the most critical one, physical probing.
And this is where we get that amazing term, scene generation. Can you break that down? Because it sounds like they're putting on a play.
I wish it was that innocent. Scene generation here means deliberately staging some kind of activity to create a distraction or to test the security response.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine someone accidentally drops a huge load of equipment right at the main gate. It causes chaos. Traffic stops. Guards have to rush over.
And while everyone is distracted,
The person who caused it is watching. How fast did the guards react? Which backup gate did they open? Did they leave another post unmanned? You create a scene to force the system to show you its playbook.
wow, that is incredibly clever. And this cluster also includes boundary wall scratching.
Which is exactly what it sounds like. Physically testing the perimeter, and can I chip this away? Is this wire loose? And the key finding is that this cluster, physical probing, correlates most strongly with the highest severity ratings.
So if you see scene generation, the risk level just shoots up.
Way up.
So we have the characters, we have the behaviors, and now we get to what I think is the real intellectual core of this whole deep dive, this statistical showdown. Because the report runs a few different mathematical tests on all this data, and this is where it gets tricky, right?
This is where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
Because the different math tests actually disagree with each other at first.
Okay, so round 1, they run the standard stuff. ANOVA and t-tests, these are the classics.
The bread and butter of Statistics 101, yeah.
Yeah.
And ANOVA, analysis of variance, just checks if the differences between groups are real or if they're just random chance.
So they compared the housekeepers against the supervisors.
Or against the migrant labor.
Yep.
And the result.
Statistically insignificant.
Exactly.
Which means, what, in plain English?
It means that according to that test, there's no meaningful difference in risk between a maid and a contractor supervisor. The p-value was 0.85. You needed to be under 0.05 for it to count as real.
So if you stopped reading the report right there, you'd think, okay, everyone is equally risky, no difference.
You would.
Yeah.
But here's the flaw, and the report points this out. We only have 25 incidents. That's a really small sample size. And with a small sample, tests like ANOVA, they struggle to find the signal in the noise. They're very conservative.
It's like trying to weigh a feather on a scale built for a truck. The scale just reads 0, but the feather is still there.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
The tool is just too blunt for the job.
So on to round 2, regression analysis. This is where we start trying to predict severity. What did this find?
This got a lot more specific. The regression model found 2 huge things. First, something called behavior count.
Which is just counting how many suspicious things someone does in one go.
Pretty much, yeah. For every extra suspicious behavior someone does in a single incident, say they're scanning the perimeter and looking at the cameras, the severity rating jumps by a predicted 0.23 points. It's cumulative.
Okay, that makes intuitive sense. The more shady stuff you do, the riskier you are. What was the second finding?
The second one directly contradicts those first tests. The regression found that just being contractor managed, so the supervisors, the migrant labor, that alone adds a predicted 0.60 points to the severity score.
Whoa. So the ANOVA said no difference, but the regression says actually just being a contractor adds more than half a point of risk.
Exactly. It's showing that who manages the labor really matters. But the real knockout punch, the thing that changes the entire conclusion, is round 3.
The Bayesian analysis.
The Bayesian analysis.
Now, for anyone listening who maybe hasn't touched a stats textbook in 20 years, or ever, why is this the game changer?
Okay, so the frequentist stats, like ANOVA, they ask, is this difference definitely not random? It wants proof. Bayesian stats asks a different question. It asks, given what we already know, what's the probability that A is riskier than B?
So it deals in likelihoods, like betting odds.
Precisely, which is often way more useful for security. You don't need absolute certainty. You need to know where to place your bets.
So what did the probability say?
It was stark. The probability of a high-severity incident, so a rating of 4 or higher, is 44.4% for the resident hired staff.
Okay, a little less than a coin flip.
But for the contractor-managed staff, That probability is 72.7%.
That's a huge gap.
It gets even clearer. The report then calculates the probability that contractors are riskier than residents overall. And that result is 94.18%.
94%.
94.18%. There is a nearly 95% certainty that the contractors are the bigger threat.
That is the aha moment for me. Because the standard math says everyone is equal, but the advanced math says no, you're 94% likely to be wrong about that.
Exactly. You could have made a really bad decision based on that first test. You might have even cut security on the contractors, thinking they were fine. The Bayesian analysis saves you from that.
So now that we know this, what's the strategy? The report lays out a dual focus strategy.
Right. You can't just ignore the housekeepers because there are so many of them. That's the volume problem.
So strategy 1 is?
High-frequency monitoring for the resident hired staff. You keep watching them because they're everywhere. You're looking for patterns and all that noise.
And strategy 2 is for the contractors.
Strategy 2 is high-severity monitoring for them. This means stricter protocols. Maybe they need an escort. Maybe they have limited access zones. Because the data tells us that when they do act up, it's not a mistake. It's a potential threat.
It's interesting, though, the report throws in a curveball at the end. We've been painting this picture of contractors are risky, residents are less so, but there's an outlier.
There's always an outlier. The dotted labor category. These are resident hired workers, but not standard housekeeping. Maybe private driver or gardener. And the report notes that the only level 5 critical incident, the absolute maximum threat, came from a dotted labor worker.
And what were they doing?
Boundary wall scratching and deliberate staging of activities.
Tin generation, again.
Exactly. And it's a really important reminder. Yes, statistically, contractors are the higher risk group. That's your 94% bet. But you can't get complacent. A 5% chance of a catastrophic event from another group is still a chance you have to manage.
It brings us back to that regression finding about the behavior count. The report suggests a rule for the guards on the ground.
The behavior count rule. Don't just look for one bad thing. If you see someone scanning the perimeter, okay, make a note. If you see them scanning the perimeter and looking at the camera, that's an alert.
And if they're doing all that and talking in a synchronized group?
That's an intervention. The more complex the behavior, the higher the risk.
It's just fascinating how we've moved from, I think that guy looks suspicious, which is so subjective, to that subject has a behavior count of 3 and belongs to a group with a 72nd percentile risk score.
It creates a framework. It tries to remove the bias of the observer. You're not judging the person. You're judging a calculated sum of their actions.
So wrapping this up, what does it all mean? We started with a stack of logs that looked like a movie script and ended with a pretty deep lesson in risk analysis.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is the difference between looking busy and being dangerous. The housekeepers looked busy, they generated the most noise in the data, but the real danger signals were hiding in that smaller, quieter group of supervisors.
Volume versus intensity.
That's it. And the fact that the standard tools, the tools most businesses probably use every day, completely missed that distinction. It took looking at the data through a probabilistic lens to see the real picture.
It does make you look at the world a little differently. When you walk into an airport or an office building, you see the guards, the cameras, but behind it all, there's this kind of logic at play.
There is. And it raises a question I was thinking about. We're seeing this behavior counting logic applied to physical security. If you do X plus Y plus Z, you're a threat.
Right.
But where else is that same logic being used? Think about your digital footprint, your workplace habits. You log in at a weird time, that's one behavior. You download a large file, that's 2. You email it to an external address, that's 3.
And suddenly you've got a high behavior count and a high severity score, and you didn't even know you were being graded.
Exactly. We're all generating these little scenes and patterns every single day with our data. This report is just a very literal physical example of a logic that's becoming, universal. Are you just high volume or are you high severity? And does the algorithm know the difference?
That is definitely something I'm going to be thinking about next time I badge into a building or just log onto my laptop.
Just, try not to start scratching the boundary walls. You should be fine.
I will keep my perimeter scanning to a minimum. Thanks for walking us through this. It's been a fascinating look at the math behind the muscle.
It was a pleasure.
And to you listening, thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next deep dive.